Hey there, boys and girls and other gentle folk. Welcome to the
Dad, tell me a story.
episode of Booze and Bible Stories. Today's episode is brought to you by, what have we got? I have been drinking Left Hand Brewing Company's Milk Stout Nitro. This is delicious. I love this beer. And then also I just made myself a kind of a poor man's mojito. Don't laugh at me.
I would never laugh.
I don't have any. I didn't have any mint and too much fancy stuff. So we've got some El Dorado, 3-year-old clear rum, some club soda, and some lime, and it's still pretty good. I'm missing that mint though. I can tell you that. All right, so. If you're new and you haven't watched the disclaimer episode, go back and watch that because that will help you. But it's not going to help you not be offended, but it will help you understand why you're offended at this content and probably that you were warned ahead of time. So if you watched any of the previous episodes, especially the disclaimer, you know that this person here, to my right is my oldest daughter, Sarah, and she is responsible for this ridiculousness because she continued to encourage and goad and prod me to tell stories in this fashion. So she was I'm not sure if I should call her a victim of the glad recipient of,
Absolutely.
of many of my stories sitting around the dinner table, and she enjoyed them enough that she was like, you got to do this. So since you're responsible for this shit, why don't you explain why you tried to talk me into doing this?
Well, like most things in our family, it all started at the kitchen table where we did everything. And one of the things that we would do is you would tell stories at every dinner. I feel like there wasn't a single meal we had at that table that you didn't have some funny anecdote to tell us, and your experiences are so unique, and the way that you tell your stories are so humorous and insightful that I thought I can't be the only one that would appreciate it. So yeah, I may have egged him along a lot to do this because it got to the point where almost every week I'd be like, so hey Dad, you told me you were gonna record a video. What's up with that? Where's that? I'm just looking at my watch like, let's get on, let's do it.
That's true. It did take quite a bit of poking. We were talking about this earlier. We were talking about how the series is called Booze and Bible Stories, and obviously it's a venue to tell Bible stories in a little bit of a different way, somewhat irreverent way. But we were talking before about how the Bible is something that existed as an oral tradition before it was written down. So there was a point at which these stories were collectively written down over an extended period of history. But before that, any of the stories that are found in the scripture and a lot of other sacred texts, and even just stories that are important to different cultures, were all stories that were shared orally before anything was ever written down. My dad told stories probably in the same way that I do. And I think one of the reasons I tell stories is because he told stories. So I kind of learned it from him. And a lot of the stories that I tell are actually Dad's stories. I still tell stories that he told. And I hope that, one day that my children will tell my stories and also tell stories that my dad told, that you've heard from me. So, what is there a favorite story and or a story that I told? It doesn't have to be a Bible story that really stood out to you from like growing up.
I mean, I would say that mostly it was all of your stories from your time in the Army, but probably
the army made for good stories.
He has a lot of content from the Army.
Maybe I'll either weave them into the series or do a whole separate series on just tales from my time with Uncle Sam. But yeah.
But the one I think that sticks out the most is your chicken story.
The chicken story. the chicken story is one of my favorite stories. We had, should I tell it now?
Mm-hmm.
Is that, yeah, that was.
I think you have to.
That was the lead-in for this story. So I was 19 or 20, deployed to Desert Storm, and we had been eating MREs for many months. MREs are meals ready to eat. They're the packaged field rations that you eat in the military.
Not super tasty.
They're not the tastiest. You learn tricks. We had recipes, hacks to try to make them edible. I mean, it didn't help much, but it helped to a degree. But one of the guys in our unit had gone back to the Gulf, to one of our primary facilities, to take some of our equipment back to have it recertified. And when he came back, he brought with him, his name was Tony Nelson, and he was from North Carolina. And he brought back with him some vegetable oil and a chicken. Like somebody had killed it and plucked it for him. It still had those tiny little kind of microscopic feathers left, you know, because it was hand plucked, so it wasn't perfect. So it was still kind of rough. And he had brought back that, and he brought back some vegetable oil. And we had generators out in the field that we could use to power various things. But he took an Army field table, which this is important to the story because an Army field table only has 3 legs on it. And so it's not the most stable kind of table. And so he had this Army field table, which has 3 legs, and we had run an extension cord into the tent from one of the generators, and he had a hot plate, and he was using, I don't even know where he got the little pan thing that he was using to cook in, because he wasn't cooking it in a canteen cup. It was a pan that fit on top of the, maybe he bought it when he was at the port, I don't remember, but he had this little pan, and he had cut up the chicken, quartered it, I guess, the legs and the breast and the thighs and stuff. And he didn't have anything to batter it with or anything like that. It was literally this hand-plucked chicken that he was just frying in just some oil. And Tony was going to share it with us, his tent mates. And so it was myself and a buddy of mine named Dennis Kaczynski, and there was this kid named Chris Vanderwall, who was part of that group, and Vanderwall comes into the tent, and let me restate, we've been eating these field rations this whole time, so this is the first bit of potential real food we will have had in months. So me and Kaczynski are sitting on cots across from the field table where Tony is standing behind it, like the master chef. He's standing there overseeing this delicious meal, you know. It's like, to us, it was like he was preparing a gourmet feast, frying this hand-plucked chicken in this vegetable oil. And Kaczynski and I were sitting there just salivating. I mean, literally, our mouths were watering because we hadn't had any real food in months, and just the smell of that chicken frying was just absolutely incredible. So we're sitting there, mouths watering, and it was close to being done. It was close. And Vanderwall comes kind of busting in the tent, and he's like, "Oh my God, what are you guys doing? You guys got chicken?" He's, you know, kind of freaking out, and he approaches the table a little too quickly, and in his excitement, and he bumps the side of the table. And I saw this all play out in slow motion. We didn't have actual floors in these tents, right? They're Army tents, and they don't come with floors. We had built a makeshift floor out of old scrap wood and some pallets and stuff like that. So, but it was still covered in sand. It was just covered in sand. And Vanderwall comes busting in. He's super excited. "What are you guys doing?" And he bumps the edge of the table. And when he does, the table just goes over. And again, like in my mind, still, it's in slow motion. He bumps the table. The table starts to tip. The hot plate starts to tip. The pan starts to slide off. It starts to flip and just slides off the edge of the table. And the chicken in this grease just goes into all this sand. And the sand over there was like talcum powder. It was like super fine. So it just turned almost to instant mud as it soaked up that grease and covered the chicken. And we looked at Vanderwall, and we looked at Tony, and then Kaczynski and I looked at each other, and we looked at the chicken, and we looked at each other again, and then me and Vanderwall just scrambled for that chicken. We just grabbed it like out of the dirt with all that dirt and mud on it, and we started like tearing into this chicken. And to this day, covered in dirt, undercooked, greasy, covered in dirt, sandy mud chicken, that is the best meal I've ever had in my entire life. Nothing has ever tasted better to me than that mud-covered chicken after going for so long without eating anything, and then sitting there smelling it. And then, now, Vanderwall, he was of course sorry that it happened. He was sorry that he didn't get any. He was sorry that he had made us angry. And we made him pay for that. We made him pay for that. But that's a story for another time. How we got our revenge on Chris Vanderwall for knocking over the chicken. But that is one of my favorite stories. It is one of my favorite stories too. But you're right. The Army gave me lots and lots of stories. I hope that you tell stories as you get older. And you can tell stories to anybody, you know. As a dad, I like to tell stories to my kids, even now that they're almost all grown, getting close to it. But I like to tell stories to friends, and I think stories have a way of communicating things about us to other people, and also communicating, you know, all kinds of interesting truths. I mean, the chicken story is a funny story, but really it's a story about like gratefulness, and like how when you go without something for so long, how good something is when you have it again. And I'm actually getting a little choked up. That's weird thinking about that, but it really is. That's what that story, the reason I still tell that story is it is the best meal I ever had, and it's because I appreciated it so much. And anytime we have a glut of something in life, sometimes we can lose appreciation for it. Whether it's, like Sarah's here visiting now, they live in another city, so I don't get to see her as often as I used to. And so that makes her being here extra special, because I've had to go without. And right now, I don't know when you'll watch this video, but right now there's a global pandemic going on. And unless you're in immediate households or family, you can't even be around each other. So I know a lot of you right now are missing friends and family. And hopefully when you do get to talk to them through social media or on the phone or whatever else, you appreciate that. And when the day comes when we get to see each other in person again, I know that we will really appreciate it, because we've gone a long time without it. I'm not the most social person, but I've discovered that as soon as they told me I couldn't socialize anymore, suddenly I missed all my friends, you know, people that I would have been like, I don't know, maybe I'll see them. And now I'm like, oh man, I wish I could see, you know, all these people. So that's funny. That's funny. So I hope anybody that's watching will share the stories that you have. And I hope that you'll think about what it is to really appreciate things, and the things that you do have a lot of, that you can always stop and kind of induce a little false scarcity, where you stop and think about, like, what would it be like if I didn't have this thing? And then that can help you appreciate the thing even when you do have it. But certainly we appreciate things that we've gone without for a while, and then we have. So, yeah. All right, I guess that's it. Anything else? Mm-hmm. We didn't know exactly how this was going to go, and so that took like a weird turn at the end.
It was a good turn.
Maybe it was the mojito. I don't know. Maybe I was, maybe it was getting to me a little more than I thought. Anyway, until next time, Skold.